Age-level characteristics. After studying this chapter, you will be able to describe one or more aspects of the physical, social, emotional, and cognitive development of preschool and kindergarten children. Describe one or more aspects of the physical, social, emotional, and cognitive development of primary grade students. The same thing for elementary, for middle school, and for high school. Also describe how technology resources can be used to help students successfully resolve the developmental challenges of egocentrism, interpersonal reasoning, and cognitive development. The theories described in the preceding chapter call attention to the course of psychosocial, cognitive, and moral development. Although these types of behavior are important, they represent only a small part of the behavior repertoire of a child or adolescent. This chapter, which is organized by age and grade levels, will present an overview of types of behavior that are not directly related to any particular theory. In selecting points for emphasis, we used one basic criterion. Does this information about development have potential significance for teachers? To organize the points to be discussed, we have divided the developmental span into 5 levels, corresponding to common grade groupings in schools. Preschool and kindergarten, ages 3 through 5. Primary grades, ages 1 through 3. Ages 6 through 8. Elementary grades, 4 through 5. 4 and 5, ages 9 and 10. Middle school, grades 6 through 8, ages 11 through 13. High school, grades 9 through 12, ages 14 through 17. Because the way grades are grouped varies, you may find yourself teaching in a school system in which the arrangement described in this chapter is not followed. In that case, simply refer to the appropriate age level designations, and if necessary, concentrate on 2 levels rather than 1. At each of the 5 levels, behaviors are discussed under 4 headings: physical, social, emotional, and cognitive characteristics. Following each characteristic are implications for teachers. To help you establish a general conception of what children are like at each level, brief summaries of the types of behaviors stressed by the theorists discussed in the preceding chapter are listed in a table in each section. Revealing assumptions. Looking through lenses. Dawn is early for today's meeting. He has been sitting quietly, thinking about 2 different classrooms he observed last Wednesday. As Connie walks into the meeting room, Don looks up and says, "Okay, Doc, tell me this. How come second graders can't seem to get enough of a teacher, and fourth graders don't even notice the teacher is in the room?" Connie puts down her bag and settles into the chair across from Don. That's a good question. Let's start with that one when Celeste and Antonio get here. In the meantime, think about what theory and research might be relevant to your question. Also, think specifically about the observations that have led you to infer that second graders and fourth graders differ in the way they interact with teachers. Celeste and Antonio are talking about 8th graders as they arrive. Celeste is trying to figure out why one science class she observed went so well, and another, the same lesson taught by the same teacher, so poorly. Sounds like you have been reflecting on the mysteries of 8th grade. Let's get back to that, but I asked Don to get us started today with some observations he made. Don describes how second graders sought the teacher's attention, whereas the fourth graders seemed to be very hesitant to speak to the teacher. He shares some specific interactions between students and teacher. So, says Connie, what would you infer from Don's observations? Celeste suggests that maybe the second grade class experienced more success in their classroom interactions than the fourth graders, and consequently have developed a sense of industry, whereas the fourth graders felt inferior. Antonio wonders if the difference might be connected to pre-operational and concrete operational thinking. Okay, says Connie, Celeste is using Erickson to explain the difference, and Antonio is applying Piaget's theory. Any other ideas? Don sits quietly for a moment and then looks at Connie. Yeah, a bunch, he says. It occurred to me that Vygotsky might have something to say about scaffolding, and then I thought about Kohlberg and Gilligan and even Marsh's ideas about identity. But even each theory would give you a different explanation. How can you tell which theory is the right answer in a particular situation? Connie looks up and says, is it possible that looking at a situation through the lenses of several theories might give us several right answers? And if so, what should we do with several right answers? Pause and reflect. Is there a right answer for each and every classroom situation? Don seems to be assuming that there is. Many people who have not studied teaching and learning make the same assumption. Consequently, they believe teaching is like following the recipe in a cookbook. Similarly, they consider learning to teach to be a matter of technical training. Simply train aspiring teachers to recognize the right answer for every possible classroom situation. What are the dangers of assuming that there is one right answer, and therefore one right theory for each classroom situation? Why should we seek more than one right answer from multiple theories? And why must aspiring teachers be educated rather than trained? Preschool and kindergarten, 3, 4, and 5 years old. Physical characteristics, preschool and kindergarten. Preschool children are extremely active. They have good control of their bodies and enjoy activity for its own sake. Provide plenty of opportunities for children to run, climb, and jump. Arrange these activities as much as possible so that they are under your control. If you follow a policy of complete freedom, you may discover that 30 improvising 3 to 5-year-olds can be a frightening thing. Because of an inclination towards bursts of activity, kindergartens need frequent rest periods. They themselves often don't recognize the need to slow down. Schedule quiet activities after strenuous ones. Have rest time. Realize that excitement may build up to a riot level if the attention of catalytic agents and their followers is not diverted. Preschoolers' large muscles are more developed than those that control fingers and hands. Therefore, preschoolers may be quite clumsy at or physically incapable of such skills as tying shoes and buttoning coats. Avoid too many small motor activities, such as pasting paper chains. Provide big brushes, crayons, and tools. Young children find it difficult to focus their eyes on small objects. Therefore, their eye-hand coordination may be imperfect. If possible, minimize the necessity for the children to look at small things. Incomplete eye development is the reason for large print in children's books. This is also important to keep in mind if you are planning to use computers or software programs. Highly graphic programs requiring a simple point-and-click response are most appropriate for very young students. Although children's bodies are flexible and resilient, the bones that protect the brain are still soft. Be extremely wary of blows to the head in games or fights between children. If you notice an activity involving such a blow, intervene immediately. Warn the class that this is dangerous and explain why. Gender differences in physical development and motor skill proficiency are usually not noticeable until kindergarten and are fairly small. Differences that do manifest themselves are due in part to biological endowment and in part to differences in socialization. Consequently, you may want to encourage all children to participate in tasks that emphasize gross motor skills and tasks that emphasize fine motor skills. A brief summary of the types of behavior stressed by the theorists discussed in the preceding chapter is found in Table 3.1. Psychosocial development. This is for preschool and kindergarten years. Initiative versus guilt. Children need opportunities for free play and experimentation, as well as experiences that give them a sense of accomplishment. Cognitive development. Pre-operational thought. Children gradually acquire the ability to conserve and decenter, but are not capable of operational thinking and are unable to mentally reverse operations. Moral development. Morality of constraint. pre-conventional. Rules are viewed as unchangeable edicts handed down by those in authority. Punishment obedience orientation focuses on physical consequences rather than on intentions. General factors to keep in mind: children are having their first experiences with school routine and interactions with more than a few peers and are preparing for initial academic experiences in group settings. They need to learn to follow directions and get along with others. Social characteristics, preschool and kindergarten. Most children have one or two best friends, but these friendships may change rapidly. Preschoolers tend to be quite flexible socially. They are usually willing and able to play with most of the other children in the class. Favorite friends tend to be of the same gender, but many friendships between boys and girls develop. Young children generally interact with most of the other children in their preschool and kindergarten classes, but think of their friends as those with whom they share toys and play the most. Although these friendships can dissolve quickly if one child hits the other, refuses to share a toy, or is not interested in playing, early friendships can be longer lasting if they are based also on shared ideas, feelings, concerns, as well as concern for the other's well-being. Whereas some children prefer to play alone or observe their peers, others lack the skills or confidence to join their peers. In those cases, you might want to provide some assistance. Play activities are an important part of young children's development and should be encouraged. Many adults believe that young children's play activities, meaning they are voluntary and self-organized, are relatively unimportant and so should be either ignored or de-emphasized by educators. Nothing could be more wrong. Research clearly shows that children of all ages profit socially, emotionally, and cognitively from engaging in play. The form and types of play that young children exhibit are quite varied. They may, for example, play by themselves with toys that are different from those being used by nearby children, play alongside but not with other children who are playing with the same toys, or play cooperatively with other children in an organized form of play. Common types of play include pretend play, mimicking the behavior of parents, siblings, and peers, exercise play, running, climbing, jumping, and other large muscle activities, and rough and tumble play, mostly wrestling types of activities, as well as pretend fighting. Boys are much more likely than girls to engage in rough and tumble play. Preschool and kindergarten children show definite preferences for gender of play peers and for pair versus group play. A 3-year study of more than 200 preschool children, average age 4.25 years, found the following play preferences. Same-sex play occurred more often than mixed-sex play. Girls were more likely than boys to play in pairs rather than groups, and boys were more likely than girls to play in groups rather than pairs. When girls did play in groups, they were more likely than boys to play in a group in which they were not the only member of their sex. When boys played with each other, whether in pairs or groups, they were more likely than girls who played with each other to engage in active, forceful play. This tendency was less apparent when a boy placed in a group that was otherwise made up of all girls, but when a girl played in a group whose other members were boys, her level of active, forceful play tended to increase. Awareness of gender roles and gender typing is evident. By the time children enter kindergarten, most of them have developed an awareness of gender differences and of masculine and feminine roles. This awareness of gender roles shows up very clearly in the toys and activities that boys and girls prefer. Boys are more likely than girls to play outdoors, to engage in rough and tumble play, and to behave aggressively. Boys play with toy vehicles and construction toys, and they engage in action games such as football. Girls prefer art activities, doll play, and dancing. By age 6, some children associate job titles that are considered to be gender neutral, such as doctor, librarian, and flight attendant, with either males in the case of doctors or females in the case of librarians and waiters. Such strong gender typing in play activities occurs in many cultures, including non-Western ones, and is often reinforced by the way parents behave. They model what their culture has defined as gender-appropriate roles and encourage boys to be active and independent and girls to be more docile. Peers may also reinforce these tendencies. A boy or girl may notice that other children are more willing to play when he or she selects a gender-appropriate toy. Therefore, if you teach preschool children, you may have to guard against the tendency to respond too soon when little girls ask for help. If they need assistance, of course, you should supply it. But if preschool girls can carry out tasks on their own, you should urge them to do so. You might also remind yourself that girls often need to be encouraged to become more achievement-oriented and boys to become more sensitive to the needs of others. Emotional characteristics, preschool and kindergarten. Kindergarten children tend to express their emotions freely and openly. Anger outbursts are frequent. It is probably desirable to let children at this age level express their feelings openly, at least within broad limits, so that they can recognize and face their emotions. In Between Parent and Child and Teacher and Child, Haim Gano offers some specific suggestions on how a parent or teacher can help children develop awareness of their feelings. His books may help you work out your own philosophy and techniques for dealing with emotional outbursts. Suppose, for example, that a boy who was wildly waving his hand to be called on during share and tell time later knocks down a block tower built by a girl who monopolized sharing time with the spellbinding story of a kitten rescued by firefighters. When you go over to break up the incipient fight, the boy angrily pushes you away. In such a situation, Guénaud suggests you take the boy to a quiet corner and engage in a dialogue such as this. "It looks as if you were unhappy about something, Connor." "Yes, I am." "Are you angry about something that happened this morning?" "Yes." "Tell me about it." "I wanted to tell the class about something at sharing time, and Lily talked for 3 hours, and you wouldn't let me say anything." "And that made you mad at Lily and at me?" "Yes." "Well, I can understand why you are disappointed and angry, but Lily had an exciting story to tell, and we didn't have time for everyone else to tell what they had to say. You can be the very first one to share something tomorrow morning. Now, how about doing an easel painting? You always do such interesting paintings." Guénaud suggests that when children are encouraged to analyze their own behavior, they are more likely to become aware of the causes of their feelings. This awareness, in turn, may help them learn to accept and control their feelings and find more acceptable means of expressing them. But because these children are likely to be in Piaget's pre-operational stage of intellectual development, bear in mind that this approach may not be successful with all of them. The egocentric orientation of 4 to 5-year-olds makes it difficult for them to reflect on the thoughts of self or others. Anger outbursts are more likely to occur when children are tired, hungry, or exposed to too much adult interference. If you take such conditions into account and try to alleviate them by providing a nap or a snack, for example, temper tantrums may be minimized. Jealousy among classmates is likely to be fairly common, as kindergarten children have much affection for the teacher and actively seek approval. When there are 30 individuals competing for the affection and attention of just one teacher, some jealousy is inevitable. Try to spread your attention around as equitably as possible, and when you praise particular children, do it in a private or casual way. If one child is given lavish public recognition, it is only natural for the other children to feel resentful. Think back to how you felt about teachers' pets during your own school years. Cognitive characteristics, preschool and kindergarten. By age 4, many children begin to develop a theory of mind. During the late preschool years, children demonstrate what one researcher called one of the most impressive intellectual accomplishments of human development. This accomplishment, which is called theory of mind, concerns the ability of children around the age of 4 to be aware of the difference between thinking about something and experiencing it. They also begin to understand that it is sometimes possible to predict the thoughts of others. These capacities are critical to understanding such aspects of social life as surprises, secrets, tricks, mistakes, and lies. By 3 years of age, most children realize the difference between thinking about something and actually experiencing that same something. But a significant change occurs around age 4 when children begin to realize that thoughts may be false. In one study described by Janet Astington, a box that children knew normally contained candy was filled instead with pencils. When 3-year-olds opened the box and discovered the pencils, they were asked what a friend would think was in the box before it was opened. They replied that the friend would know, just as they now did, that there were pencils inside. When they were asked later what they thought was in the box before it was opened, they replied, pencils rather than candy, indicating an inability to recall that their belief had changed. But 4-year-olds understood that the friend would be misled by the fact that pencils had replaced the candy. The 4-year-olds also remembered that they themselves had expected the box to contain candy. So beginning at age 4, children start to realize that the actions of people are based on how they think the world is. Talking about different viewpoints will help children understand that people have beliefs about the world, that different people believe different things, and that beliefs may change when new information is acquired. Astington offers the following example of how teachers can foster the development of children's theory of mind. In a first grade classroom that I recently observed, the teacher often talked about her own thought processes, saying, for example, "I just learned something new," when she found out that one student had a pet rabbit at home. When she was surprised or made a mistake, she talked about her own wrong beliefs. And at story time, she had the children talk about the motivations and beliefs of story characters. Her style of talk helped the class focus not just on the thought content, but also on the thinking process. Yet the term theory of mind was unknown to this teacher. Kindergartners are quite skillful with language. Most of them like to talk, especially in front of a group. Providing a sharing time gives children a natural opportunity for talking, but many will need help in becoming good listeners. Some sort of rotation scheme is usually necessary to divide talking opportunities between the gabby and the silent extremes. You might provide activities or experiences for less confident children to talk about, such as a field trip, a book, or a film. Many preschool and kindergarten children do not accurately assess their competence for particular tasks. Preschool and kindergarten children typically think of themselves as being much more competent than they actually are, even when their performance lags behind that of their peers. They do not differentiate between effort and ability as factors that affect performance. Although this limitation in self-assessment is influenced, at least in part, by the characteristics of pre-operational stage thinking, it can also be the result of classroom environments that are relatively unstructured, that emphasize free play, and that de-emphasize peer-peer comparisons. Israeli children who grew up on a kibbutz, a communal form of living, in which child rearing occurs as much within a peer group as within one's nuclear family, used peer comparison to construct a sense of their own competence about a year earlier than did urban children, who spent most of their time within their own families. Despite this limitation in self-assessed competence, research suggests that under the right conditions, even some 4-year-olds can draw accurate conclusions about how well or poorly they have completed a task. In one study, children between the ages of 4 and 5 were asked to do a simple maze-type task, tracing a winding path between an illustrated child and a house, under one of two conditions, either in the presence of another child's work or in comparison with their own earlier attempt at the same task. About 40% of those who had another child's work available were able to use that to accurately assess their own performance. Most of the rest of this group could gauge their own performance by using the goal as a basis for comparison. I only got halfway to the house. Children in the second group, however, were unable to use their prior performance on the maze to judge whether their current performance was any better or worse. even when shown both attempts. Self-assessment of competence under this condition does not typically appear until somewhere between 7 and 8 years of age. Competence is encouraged by interaction, interest, opportunities, urging, limits, admiration, and signs of affection. Studies of young children rated as highly competent show that to encourage preschoolers to make the most of their abilities, adults should interact with the child often and in a variety of ways, should show interest in what the child does and says, provide opportunities for the child to investigate and experience many things, permit and encourage the child to do many things, urge the child to try to achieve mature and skilled types of behavior, establish firm and consistent limits regarding unacceptable forms of behavior, explain the reasons for these as soon as the child is able to understand, listen to complaints if the child feels the restrictions are too confining, and give additional reasons if the limits are still to be maintained as originally stated. Show that the child's achievements are admired and appreciated. Communicate love in a warm and sincere way. Diana Baumrein's research, spanning over 4 decades, has identified 4 types of child-rearing approaches and how they contribute to competence in children. As we have seen in this and the previous chapter, the kinds of social interactions children experience shape them. Parents have tremendous power over the kinds of interactions and experiences that their children have. Baumrind and her colleagues have found that the ways in which parental power is or is not exercised have profound effects on their children. Authoritative parents tend to raise competent children. Authoritative parents have confidence in their abilities as parents and therefore provide a model of competence for their children to imitate. When they establish limits and explain reasons for restrictions, they encourage their children to set standards for themselves and to think about why certain procedures should be followed. According to Baumrind, the kind of power that characterizes authoritative parents is confrontive, reasoned, negotiable, outcome-oriented, and concerning with regulating behaviors. Because these parents are also warm and affectionate, children value their positive responses as rewards for mature behavior. The children of authoritative parents tend to be self-motivated. They stand up for what they believe, yet are able to work productively with others. Authoritarian parents, by contrast, make demands and wield power, but their failure to take into account the child's point of view and their lack of warmth lead to resentment and insecurity on the part of the child. The kind of power that characterizes authoritarian parents is coercive, arbitrary, peremptory, domineering, and concerned with marking status distinctions. Children of authoritarian parents may do as they are told, but they are likely to do so out of compliance or fear, not out of a desire to earn love or approval. They also tend to be other-directed rather than inner-directed. Permissive parents, as defined by Baumrind, are disorganized, inconsistent, and lack confidence, and their children are likely to imitate such behavior. Permissive parents make few demands of their children, allow them to make many of their own decisions, do not require them to exhibit mature behavior, and tend to avoid confrontations with their children. As a result, such children are markedly less assertive and intellectually skilled than are children from authoritative homes. Finally, neglecting parents do not make demands on their children or respond to their emotional needs. They do not structure the home environment and are not supportive of their children's goals and activities, and may actively reject or neglect their child-rearing responsibilities. Children of neglecting parents are the least socially and intellectually competent of the 4 types. Teachers, especially teachers of young children, use power as they interact with their students. How and whether teachers choose to exercise that power can have long-lasting effects on their students. Given the characteristics of preschool and kindergarten children, what classroom atmosphere and instructional tactics would you use to foster learning and enjoyment of school.